Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now to our interview portion that I told you earlier on, we'll be focusing on the SME sector. And according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Kenya is home to approximately 7.4 million micro, small and medium enterprises, as well as the majority of these businesses operate in the informal sector, but they contribute to the country's economy, contributing at least about 40% to the country's gross domestic product and are a major source of employment for its citizen. Now, to talk to us through this particular sector, how it is faring on the challenges and the opportunities in that particular sector, is none other than Wilson Mugo. He is a seasoned banker, entrepreneur and fintech innovator with over 25 years of experience. Wilson, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Abdi.
And maybe, Wilson, give us a general outlook of how the MSME sector is currently progressing in the country.
Yeah, thank you, Abdi. The MSME sector is actually thriving at the moment. Not as fast as would have expected, but I think there's still growth nevertheless. And it's growing in certain sectors. Particularly, we are finding an input of the women and youth in agriculture. And there's also a lot of push for this sector or this segment to be able to access financing. But challenges are still there, generally, for the SMEs. Yes.
And given that you've talked about those challenges, what are these challenges that you have noted that has inhibited the MSMEs sector from growing?
I think there are several, a couple of them, but I would start with the highlights of them. I think the biggest one is actually the high interest rate. As you find that there are many providers of credit, commercial banks, microfinance banks, and then of course the other informal lenders that are there. But generally you find for the MSMEs, the risk is actually priced higher. So the access, if they're going to access credit, much higher in terms of interest rates. And then, of course, there's also the challenge of the process they go through before they access credit because of their informality. They are very informal in terms of records. They don't have records. In terms of registration of their businesses, they haven't done that as well. And for any financial serious one, they would definitely require that kind of information to be able to make a decision whether to lend a business. So the informality is also a contributor. And the other one is also the fact that most of them are involved in sectors that are also not financed at the primary level. For example, in agriculture. Traditionally, for most of the commercial banks and major lenders, they don't finance the primary production. That is, if you're doing production at the farm level, you find very few opportunities for players in that market to lend to the agricultural sector. But you'll find that they are much more willing to engage in the agro-processing sector, for example. But then again, if you're not enabling the primary production, even the agro-processor also has challenges because their volumes and capacity is also not as high as they should be. The other one you'll find is the issue of how they have a long-term view of their business. I think in my engagement with most of these SMEs is you'll challenge them about what is the future of their business, and they just have like a survival mode. This is on the owners of the business, not necessarily on the supply side of the credit. And you need to develop a culture of looking at the MSME business not only as an opportunity to fill up time around the fact that someone is not employed at the moment, but as a full-time engagement, and choose the sectors correctly and work with them. For example, in agriculture, a lot of youth are going there in unique kind of farming, not the maize and beans. I found a case where one of our youth told me that he's doing black soldier farming, something that I was quite new. I had not heard about it. Yeah, so the issue of choice of sectors and also the kind of resilience that you need to be built into the business. It's not an in-out kind of engagement. Yeah.
And in terms of all those bottlenecks, what impact has it had on this sector, especially when it comes to it contributing to the country's economic growth?
The sector contributes a very huge proportion of GDP, and in fact also in terms of employment. Most of the people who are formerly employed, they almost constitute less than 30%. So the other balance, which is over 70%, is obviously taken over by the MSME businesses. And then by way of their structure is that they employ either relatives or people around the area of operations, where they operate. If they are operating within a certain region, they are just or a certain town. But then again, you find that because of their numbers, even though their individual contribution is not as much, because of their numbers, they have a very huge contribution in aggregate levels. So they are important. They need to be, the challenges that they face, for example, the interest rate, it needs to be addressed. And in terms of what I see in the market currently, central bank has actually had a very good push to try and reduce the interest rates and come up with a new interest rate regime, which is going to help now MSMEs access credit going forward. But in the absence of that, it was very, very difficult. So I think the challenge from a central bank point of view is actually being addressed in terms of interest rate. The other one is choice of sector. We need to encourage most of these MSMEs to go into certain sectors like manufacturing, which again has also traditionally been having a lot of underfunding, so that this country can actually grow economically. Because without for example, the manufacturing side taking over the agro-processing of the agricultural produce, then we still have trade at the very subsistence level. Yes.
And talking about, given that you're also a banker, when it comes to lending to some of the people who want to venture into MSMEs, how do you address such bottlenecks so that they can be able to run their business without any hurdle?
Yeah, I think on the side of the bank, which I also want to comment on, is that banks have also been running a traditional model, which also needs to be addressed, where they're just looking at the historical performance of a business. And most of these MSMEs, because they have not been keeping their records, but they have turnovers, it means that when you apply the traditional model, they're actually kicked out. But I've seen also a move in terms of fintechs that are coming on board to try and use the cash flow to be able to assess the affordability of any particular MSME to be able to access loan, as opposed to just looking at their historical record. So banks also need to allocate funds to be able to finance MSMEs in a particular focused sector activity, so that if they are in their total book, if they are having allocation of funding to MSMEs compared to the other corporates, I guess that should be in a huge proportion so that they can be able to pay attention to them. The other one is to help the MSMEs to be able to formalize their business. I don't think the banks themselves have the capacity, but they can work with stakeholders in the market, business development services that can actually come and help the chosen or sector to be able to make their records well. The other thing is the use of M-Pesa, which is a digital way of actually being able to look at how they're performing using the M-Pesa statement. And a lot of that is happening at the moment. A lot of fintechs are now deploying technology to be able to appraise and maybe able to make a decision on a business based on the M-Pesa transactions. But you'll find still there are many banks that actually do not take M-Pesa statements as a document to be able to validate the potential ability of an MSME to be able to pay a loan. Yes.
And when it comes to some of the recommendations, given that you're a key stakeholder and you do represent other people out there, so in terms of bringing this forth not only to the government but to the relevant institutions, what are certain recommendations would you make to address the current gaps that you're witnessing in the sector?
One, I think the recommendation is that the central bank, besides making the push to reduce the interest rate, they should also push for sector focus on the commercial banks and any other players that are in the market to provide the supply side of credit, so that there's a very deliberate attempt or a deliberate focus to make sure that MSMEs actually access money from the market. Because today you'll find banks, or even in the past, you'll find banks pushing money to treasury bills and other sort of investments and denying money to this sector. So that's one. Number two is that of course the government is also trying to bring in the changes, especially with the MSME Act they did in 2012, Act of 2012, to actually define what these MSMEs are and what's their role in the economy, and that the government is actually focusing on them. So the other sector is the other recommendation is to make sure that these MSMEs are actually brought even to recognition, not only at the national level, but even at the county government level, so that the county governments also themselves support the MSMEs in their regions. And because of some of these county governments also have their unique economic activities. For example, if you go to, for example, Nyanza or Kisumu, there is the economy around the lake and fishing and all those activities. The MSMEs playing in that kind of, all those county governments, they should help in enabling, for example, the BDS side, which is obviously the financials will not be able to do, to help them be able to formalize their business and to be knowledgeable enough to be able to take up credit, and actually to encourage the MSMEs to actually take up credit, because that's also the other side. Most of them shy away from credit because they either been denied in the past or they have a history of like, you can't access credit. I think they should be encouraged, or we should continue to encourage them to actually formalize a business and actually access credit for business growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then moving forward, what are some of the trends you have witnessed, especially cropping up at this digital age, that we need to embrace it? If we do not embrace it, we could see this sector collapsing.
I think one is the issue of technology, because broadly, as maybe again from the commercial bank sector, is that the technology is developing so fast in terms of the access to information that is available for financing businesses. For example, there is the open banking, which is a global initiative across the world that all banks now need to be able to provide data across for customers across any platform, so that if I am banking with any bank, I can give my data to any financial provider to be able to make a decision on whether to lend me. So that initiative is coming on board. I don't think the current banking sector is actually fully onboarded into that, but it's the future of how our banking space will evolve, so that you don't have to actually take out a statement and take it to a bank. The open banking initiative is going to make sure that the data belongs to the customer, and the customer can use it to any provider that comes on board. The other one is the issue of how we continue digitizing our banking environment, or even our business environment. For example, the M-Pesa has already taken a route in Kenya, but there are also other things, like, for example, how we digitize the business at the operational level, so that a trader can be able to, instead of writing paper to show their sales, they can actually have an application, and those applications are already there in the market, to be able to record all their transactions every day. So if I have made sales, I have them recorded digitally. If I have made any purchases, I've made them digitally. And then that digital interface can be provided to financiers to be able to enable a much more seamless and faster credit underwriting. Yes.
And now give us your final remarks, Wilson. Given that we are looking for opportunities within this particular sector, it could even be the silver bullet to unemployment in this country. So give us your final remarks in relation to that.
Absolutely, Abdi. I think the truth is that if we have this grappling big problem, not only in Kenya, I think it's all over the world. There's a youth bulge who are not going to be employed in the formal sector because the opportunities are actually also diminishing. Given that, for example, AI is coming on board and it's taking away a lot of jobs, and what remains is actually, say, certain sectors, like, for example, in agriculture. Those ones, we still need an engagement of people in terms of practical productivity. So I would like to recommend that we take this MSME sector seriously, because it can provide the much-needed employment. It can also provide the much-needed economic growth from those sectors that I've mentioned: agriculture, manufacturing, trade and services, and across the economy. It plays a very big role to ensure that our economy or even economies in other countries are actually thriving.
Okay, thank you so much. That is Wilson Mogo-Nguyo, a seasoned banker and entrepreneur and a fintech innovator with over 25 years of experience. Thank you for making time for us this afternoon, and of course giving us a status update of a sector that is home to 7.4 million Kenyans who are out there currently operating within the MSMEs sector.